Okay, so welcome back from Thanksgiving. Who's heard the phrase food coma? Anyone ever heard the phrase food coma? Yes, some of you. Who achieved the food coma? Who achieved it? Yes. Okay, some of you. So, whether or not you achieved the food coma or not, you probably have forgotten what we've been talking about at youth the past few weeks. So, does anyone know what's the name of the series that we're in? Like, what are we talking about? Yeah. Owen. This changes everything. Do you want to explain a little what it's about, or someone else? Someone else. And then what's it? Yeah, Hope.
Should I just talk
I
loudly?
think you can. I believe in you.
Alright, so we're kind of...
Can't hear you!
We're kind of talking about the birth of Jesus!
The birth of Jesus. Yes, that's one thing we talked about. Anything else? Anyone else want to add to this changes everything? That was correct, Owen, by the way. This changes everything. Anyone else? Any additions? No? Okay, that's right. So we've been talking about Jesus' life, and we've been talking about how even though it was over 2,000 years ago, on the other side of the planet, in some obscure, tiny place, somehow it changes things in our life today, right? Somehow, some way, our lives are different because of this person that we call Jesus. This person named Jesus, who lived all this time ago, somehow makes our lives different. And every part of his life seems to make a different part of our lives different. So here, this is representing the life. We talked about his birth a couple times. What does this represent? Anyone guess? Death, that's right. What does this represent? Resurrection. So we'll get there. So we talked about Jesus' birth, talked about Jesus' life. Today we're going to continue to talk about Jesus' life, but I want to give a quick recap about what we've done the past few weeks. So, way back when, in November, the very beginning of November, we started with Jesus' birth, and we talked about how Jesus' birth changes what it means for Jesus to come into our lives. Jesus' birth changes what it means to come into our lives. We talked about how Jesus coming into our life doesn't guarantee our happiness and doesn't guarantee our safety or guarantee that everything's going to be better all of a sudden. And we talked about how Mary and Joseph, when Jesus came into their life probably actually got a little bit harder and a little bit more challenging. Then I kept talking about Jesus' birth for a second week, and we said it changes how we understand God relating to us. Jesus coming to the world as a baby, as a human, told us that God is no longer this distant, like far-off God who doesn't relate to us and doesn't know what it's like to be human, but he came. We talked about like this little alien baby coming covered in slime and pooping and throwing up. Jesus knows what it means to be human. And then the last time we were together before Thanksgiving, the week before Thanksgiving, we talked about how Jesus' life changes the way that we see and that we treat people. We talked about how just because people have less than us, maybe less money or less education, doesn't mean that they are less than us, right? We talked about the people that Jesus spent his time with were the nobodies and the poor people and the prostitutes. Those are the people who would have been sitting in the chairs in Jesus' church. And so part of Jesus' life that changed things was the way that he treated people. Tonight we're going to continue to talk about Jesus' life. But we're going to really focus in on a unique part of Jesus' life, something that really set Jesus apart from others, and that's his miracles, the miracles that Jesus did. We hear a lot about the miracles when we talk about Jesus, and rightfully so, I think, rightfully so, because the miracles that Jesus did were something that no one else in the history of humanity had done before. They set him apart from everyone else. And so that's where we're going to focus in on tonight on Jesus' life, specifically on his miracles, and maybe see how that changes things for us. See how our life might be different because of the miracles that Jesus did. And so to start the night thinking about Jesus' miracles, I want us to put together a big list of all of the miracles that we can think of that Jesus did, all right? So we're going to come up, we're going to use this whiteboard to make a list. But before we do that, I want you to turn to a neighbor or two and start brainstorming some of the miracles that you can think of that Jesus did. Start to make a mental list, and then we'll come together and make a bigger list. All right, you guys feel like you have a pretty good list of miracles? All right, here we go. So we're going to use this handy dandy whiteboard to start a list. So, Jesus' miracles. Let me hear some of them. What are some of the miracles? Adam. Walked on water. Water or walking. I don't know why I wrote it that way, but I did. Michael, were you next to him? Water into wine. What's another one? Just shout it out.
The fish!
Fish? What about them?
He made them catch a lot of fish.
Fish. A lot. Equals a lot. Gabriel. Cast demons. Nice. Do you say into the pigs? Does anyone remember that story where Jesus cast the demons into pigs? Michael?
He made people walk.
Made people walk. I'll say the lame can walk. How about that? Something else. Hope? I can't come back to Eden. Blind man's sight. I'll dry out an eyeball. That's poor eyeball. Caden. What is it? Feeding the 5,000? 5,000, I'll just write to abbreviate. Come on, keep them going. Noah. Cured diseases. Dead back to life? Was that Sophie? Addie? Sorry. Dead back to life. What else? 10 lepers? Awesome. Who is that? Thank you. Stormy seas? Keep them coming. Miracles. Keep them coming. Griffin. What? Adoption? Okay. What do you mean by that? Yeah, adoption. Oh, that's right. You were adopted, so it's a miracle. Awesome. Cool. Hope, did you remember yours?
Yeah. So he rose himself from the dead.
Rose from the dead. Yeah. What about from this section over here? Who too? Jaden? Red Sea. So that was that was God in the Old Testament, right? We'll count it. We'll count it. Not quite Jesus, but I get what you're saying. Gabriel? He put the guy's ear back on after Peter cut it off, right? Guy's ear. All right, we've got room for like 2 more. I can fit 2 more. Any miracles, Lacey?
Saved from lion's den.
What is that?
Saved from lion's den.
From the lion. So that was Daniel in the lion's den. Okay, so that was God doing a miracle. We'll count it. We'll count it. So Jesus wasn't quite alive yet for a couple of those, but that's okay. Michael. The woman touched Jesus' cloak. Awesome, we'll end there. Woman touched cloak. And we're going to end there because we're actually going to talk about that one tonight. So, thank you, Michael. Okay, good job. Jonah, do you have one more? Yeah? Oh, I was talking to Griffy up front, but thank you. Okay, so this is a good list. This is a pretty good list that we put together, right? I think we did a pretty good job. We named a bunch of them. I gotta find my clicker. Here it is. So this is a pretty good list, but I wanted to get a complete list. So I looked up all of the miracles that Jesus did. This is them up here. It's actually two pages long. I couldn't fit them all on one page. So you can look over them. Some of them match from up here. Some of them are different. I'm not going to read through all of them, but the point that I want you guys to get is that there were a lot of miracles, right? Jesus did a lot of miracles. And maybe you remembered some of these when you were brainstorming with a friend, or maybe now that you see them, I'll go to the next one, maybe now that you see them, you remember them. Or maybe you look at these and you haven't heard of any of these, or maybe they're just like a different title. So maybe they're familiar, maybe they're not. But whatever the case is, we can all agree that Jesus did miracles, right? Jesus did miracles, and they're all pretty incredible miracles. And so, as much as I wish we could focus on every single one of these and see what does that mean for us, we're just going to focus in on a couple tonight, right? We're just going to focus in on 2 stories of Jesus doing miracles. And the first one is what we call Jesus calming the storm. We call it Jesus. Who's heard of Jesus calming the storm story? A number of you. Okay, so we call it Jesus calming the storm. It's found in 3 of the Gospels. It's found in Matthew chapter 8. The story is found in Mark chapter 8. And then it's also found in Luke chapter 4. So it's told 3 different times. But tonight, as you just saw, we're going to watch a little animated video of our friendly little Jesus. Who remembers friendly little Jesus? Yes. Okay, Roy, I need you to keep it together after we see friendly Jesus. You usually have a hard time. Okay, so we're going to watch Jesus calming the storm. Here it is from Friendly Jesus.
Stories of the Bible. Jesus calms the storm. This is Jesus. He is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. While Jesus was on earth, he taught everyone about God's love and healed people from their sickness. He did many miracles like walking on water, disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake."
You got it.
So he got into a boat and started out. Other boats followed him too. And as they sailed across, Jesus fell asleep. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water and they were in real danger. The disciples went and woke Jesus up, shouting,
Hey, you, wake up.
"Save us! We are going to drown! Don't you care if we drown?" Jesus responded, "Why are you afraid? You have so little faith." Then he got up and rebuked the wind and waves, saying, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Where is your faith?" The disciples were terrified and amazed. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. When he gives a command, even the wind and waves obey him.
All right, so that's Jesus calling. So that's Jesus calming the storm. And now I think we read and we hear about these stories all the time, especially if you've grown up in church. You've heard about these stories a lot of the times. And I think we get so used to hearing these and so used to now watching them and hear them being told that we kind of just like glance over them as if they're like normal. We're just like, oh yeah, like Jesus like calmed the storm. Like just any other day, he kind of just like went out and was like, all right, storm, calm down. And it's really easy to just be like, yeah, like that was no big deal. Like calm the storm, whatever, like move on. But if we actually think about it, if we actually think about what Jesus did when he calmed the storm, I think it's pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy storm. It's not like normal for a storm to just be raining, be thundering, be lightning, whatever it is, and then just for someone to say, peace, be still, or whatever he might have said, and then for it to be calm. That's not like a normal happenstance. After the storm calms down, what do the disciples say? Does anyone remember what the disciples say about what Jesus just did? Anyone remember? The disciples in the boat, they said something. Yeah, Noah. Even the wind and the waves, yeah, exactly. Even the wind and the waves obey him. Now, that sounds nice, and that sounds poetic to be like, yeah, like even the winds and the waves obey him. We like to put it in our songs. It sounds really nice, but it's actually an incredibly powerful statement to say that Jesus calmed the winds and the waves and they obeyed him. Because if you think about it, of all the things on the planet, of all the things on the earth that humans try to protect ourselves from, right? The things that we might be scared of, nature, or the wind and the waves, is the one thing that we don't have control over, right? We can't control nature. You think about car accidents are scary, but we can do things to prevent car accidents, right? We can have safer cars and have safer driving patterns. We can do things to protect ourselves from that. Or if you think about maybe like sickness. Sickness can be really scary, but we can also do things to protect ourselves, like take vitamins or eat good foods to protect ourselves from sickness. Or war and fighting. That can be really scary, but we can do things to hopefully avoid going to war with people. Mother Nature is scary, but we can't really do anything, right? We don't have control over Mother Nature. We don't have control over the wind and the waves. And so for Jesus to claim control over even nature was the ultimate statement of power. And it was more than just him calming the storm. It was more than Jesus just calming this little storm that they were going through. It was a statement about who God is, about the nature of who God is. And so Jesus, in doing this, did more than just calm a storm. He made a statement about who God is. So that's the first miracle. Jesus calming the storm. The second miracle I want us to look at comes from Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. And I need a couple volunteers to help me read the story. Can I have a couple volunteers to help me read the story? One. Yeah, Tyler, you want to help too? Yeah, you guys can come up. You're going to come up and read. Is that okay? All right. Here we go. Come on up. Yeah, thank you for our volunteers. So, Luke chapter 8. I'll have you guys read, I'll have you read like the first half, and then I'll tell you when to stop, and then I'll have you read the second half, all right? So it's Luke chapter 8. It'll be up on the screen. I'll click through it with you, all right? So why don't you guys all listen along as I read this story from Luke chapter 8. In the microphone.
Yeah, you can start. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. A woman in the crowd suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped.
All right, great. So we're going to pause there. Tyler, can you keep reading for us? Tyler, please stay.
Who touched me? Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you. But Jesus said, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out of me. When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Give it up for our volunteers. Okay, so maybe you read this story. Maybe you read this story and you're like, this is awesome, this is amazing, like, I can't believe what Jesus just did. This is incredible, like, I'm hyped, like, let's go. Maybe you're super excited, you're amped when you read this story. And that's great. That's a great way to respond to the story. And I think we should respond to a story like that of Jesus healing this woman. But if you're a little bit like me, it doesn't always go that way. I read this story and I'm not super amped up, I'm not super hyped about it, I'm kind of just like, eh. So let me give you a little glimpse into my head of what it kind of looks like when I read a little story like this. So I read it and say, okay, Jesus healed this woman who had been bleeding for years and years and years. Here we go, that's great, but why does that matter for me? Like, I don't really have any problems like that. I don't have to be healed of anything. This doesn't really seem to affect me. Like, this doesn't really matter to me. But then I kind of scold myself, and I'm like, hey, you're a youth pastor. You have to learn from this. Like, come on. There's something to be learned here. Like, go back, read it again. There's going to be something great. So then I regroup myself, and I go back into it with a more positive attitude. I'm like, okay, so I read that Jesus healed this person. And maybe I don't need to be healed of anything, but I learned that Jesus can heal people, and so maybe I can pray for people and I can see them healed. Like, I can pray in Jesus' name and see them healed, which is 100% true. I believe Jesus heals people. We can pray for them and see them be healed. But then I kind of start to think about how I had this one friend who I prayed for years and years and years because they were sick, and nothing seemed to change. Nothing in this person's life was any different. They were still sick. They seemed to be the same as they were before I prayed for them. Nothing in their life changed. And then I'm back to where I started, saying, okay, Jesus, like, you healed this woman, and I read a bunch of other stories of you healing people, but I don't see it in my life. Like, this doesn't really seem to change anything for me. I'm just going to go find something to eat now, and I'm going to move on and be done with my day, right? So, and then I move on with my life. And I think that's where we really have some conflict when it comes to reading about all these incredible stories about Jesus's miracles. Because while they're awesome, and they really did change people's lives, they really made a difference for people, sometimes it doesn't really seem like they did much more than that. It doesn't seem like they did change anything other than this person's life, right? Because Jesus maybe fed the 5,000, but today there's still people all over the world who are starving and without food and are dying every day. And Jesus might have calmed that storm, but there's still destructive and deadly storms that come through all parts of the world and kill thousands of people each year. And maybe Jesus healed that woman, but there's still people who have diseases and who suffer and are sick and are dying every day. And so what do we do with stuff like that? What do we do when we, despite Jesus' miracles, despite these awesome things that he did, our life doesn't really seem to look much different because of it? What do we do when we see that the world is still really messed up, that there's still people who are dying, that there's still people that are hurting? Jesus did these miracles, but nothing seems to have changed. What do we do with that? And I think we need to do this. I think this is what we do, is that when we look at Jesus' miracles, when we look at these little stories of him healing people, or name any one of these things, calming the stormy seas, healing the 10 lepers, raising the dead back to life, when we look at these stories, we need to keep in mind the whole story of the Bible. We need to keep in mind the whole story of the Bible. Can I have Cody and Nate and those guys come back up? So when we look at these little stories, these little miracle stories, we need to keep in mind the whole story. Do you guys know that the Bible tells one big story? Has anyone ever heard it put that way, that the Bible tells one big story from beginning to end? There's a lot of little stories in between that happen. There's a lot of different characters, and there's like a lot of different plot lines, and it ebbs and flows. But from the beginning to the end of the Bible is one continuous story. What happens at the beginning of the story? Who remembers what happens at the beginning? Adam. Creation, that's right. Here we go. Our book of Genesis, creation. God creates everything that's on earth, and it's good. And then he creates humans, and it's what? It's very good. Adam and Eve, it's very good. And God lives with the humans, right? God lives with the humans, and it's good. And then, what happens at the end of the story? Anyone? The book of Revelation, what's going to happen at the end of the story? Anyone know? Yeah, Alyssa. So there's a new heaven and there's a new earth, is what Alyssa said. God is going to one day make all things good again. The book of Revelation talks about what's going to happen. I want to read a little verse from the book of Revelation. It says this, talking about what's going to happen in the future. So we know what happened here in Genesis. Everything was good. God lived with his people, right? Then we look in Revelation, it says this, God will live with his people. Does that sound familiar? God will live with his people. God himself will be them. He'll wipe every tear from their eyes. There won't be any more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. All these things will be gone forever. Do you guys see the similarities between the beginning and the end, right? So everything is good. God lives with his people. Genesis. And the end, what's going to happen? He'll wipe every tear from their eyes. There won't be suffering. There won't be pain. And God will live with his people. But is everything okay right now, where we are? Is everything in the world okay? No. Right where we are, but between Genesis and between Revelation, between the beginning and between the end, everything is not okay. And so Jesus' miracles, we need to think of them as signs, I think. We need to think of Jesus' miracles as signs of what is to come. Think of them as a glimpse into the world as God meant it to be. The miracles were a sign. They kind of point back to how things were at the beginning, and they're also a sign of what is to come in the future. A world where there'll be no more pain, where there'll be no more death, where there'll be no more suffering. And so the miracles were this little taste of Jesus saying, hey, this isn't how it's always going to be. Jesus said, by doing these miracles, Jesus said, this is not the end of the story. Jesus came right in the middle of everything being good in the beginning, everything being good at the end, and said, hey, right now, things are not okay. I recognize that. Things are not okay. But look, here's a little glimpse, here's a little taste of what will be in the future. And so they were a promise saying, hey, this isn't the end of the story. Right here, what you're going through is not the end of the story. And so maybe like Jesus' miracles that you look at, maybe you look at Jesus' miracles and be like, hey, like, it doesn't seem to change anything in my life today. My life doesn't look any different. Maybe like that, you feel like Jesus doesn't really seem to make my life any different. Like, I still don't feel like I fit in anywhere with my friends or on the teams that I play on. I feel like I don't fit in. Or maybe you still have a lot of anxiety that you deal with. My life doesn't look any different because of Jesus. I still have all this stuff, anxiety and fear that I deal with. Or maybe you feel like you don't really matter. Maybe you feel like you don't really have like a purpose or a meaning. But Jesus is here to say, just like his miracles, hey, this isn't the end of the story. This isn't where things end. This isn't how things end. Jesus is here to say, hey, I'm doing something now that you can't see. I'm doing something behind the scenes that you can't see. Much like his miracles were a glimpse into what is to come, Jesus is here saying, hey, everything might not be as it should be right now, but I promise that one day things will be good. God will live with his people. So maybe that doesn't satisfy you. Maybe you feel like, well, I want it to be good now. Like, I don't want to wait until the end. But that's part of what it means to follow Jesus. We're called believers for a reason, and we have faith for a reason, right? Because we believe in something to come, and we have faith in something to come. And so when we know that Jesus will make all things right again, when we know that this right here, this moment where we're suffering isn't the end of the story, that changes us. And it gives us hope, and it gives us hope that gets us to the next day, and the next day, and tomorrow, and the next day. It's that hope in something that we can't see right now that gets us through, that gives us the strength to make it through each day. And despite what our life circumstances might be like, they might not all be fixed, they might not all be good. Everything in our life might not yet be changed, like the series says. But we can hold on to this hope, right, that says, hey, Jesus did these miracles that promised of this life that is to come. And the same is true in us. There is hope. There's something up ahead. This isn't the end of the story. What you're going through right now is not the end of the story. And so we're going to sing a song together that's called Give Me Faith. And I thought it was really fitting. So if you're here tonight and you feel like, hey, like, you know, I follow Jesus, I go to church, I read my Bible, I do these things, but it doesn't really seem to have changed everything. If you feel like you need a little more faith in what is to come, a little more faith that this isn't the end of the story, I just encourage you to sing this straight to God. It says, give me faith, and it talks about trusting him. That we might be weak, that we might have things that go wrong in our life. But Jesus is inside of us. His Spirit lives in us. And his miracles were a glimpse into the world that is to come, into the world as God intends it to be. And he is faithful, and he will keep his promises. So we're going to sing that together. Why don't we all stand up as we get ready to sing? I'm going to pray for us as we make this our prayer. Jesus, things right now don't always seem okay. Things in the world don't always seem as they should be, and they're not. You knew that, God. But these miracles that you did, they gave us a glimpse into the future. They gave us a glimpse into the world as you really want it to be, as you intended to be. And you said, hey, the story doesn't end here. Here's a taste of what is to come. Here's a taste of what I really want things to be like. So God, we need faith. It's hard when we can't see that, and that's not very clear. We need faith. So God, would you give us faith as we trust you, as we hope in something to come. Give us faith in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our struggles that we face on a daily basis. With the hope of who you are and what you've promised, give us strength to go to the next day, and the next day, and the next day. God, would your hope carry us through? So Jesus, just instill in each of us, in myself, God, instill more faith where I need it. Faith where I have doubt, and hope where I have fear, God. Would you teach us what it means to have faith?